From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana. I don't normally like to talk about this. It feels self-indulgent and, well, a little bit embarrassing. Even when I'm in restaurants, there'll be an awkward moment when the waiter will ask if anyone has any allergies, and all my friends and family will look around at me expectantly, and I wait just a moment, wishing I had nothing to say before I rattle off a long list. I'm allergic to nuts. Not just peanuts, all nuts. Yes, that does include coconuts and hazelnuts. Yep, and walnuts. Macadamias, they could kill me. And did I mention sesame seeds? I really can't eat sesame seeds. And I shouldn't go anywhere near sunflower seeds either. Poppy seeds, I can eat a couple, and then it gets bad. Really, really bad. I hate the ritual of running through it all. I'd avoid it if I could, but I know what happens if I do. I remember every allergic reaction I've had because every time, it feels like it could be the last. It starts with an ominous tingling. Sometimes it's on your lips, more often on your tongue. Pretty quickly, it feels like the whole of your mouth is violently itchy, and then it seizes your throat. It's not just itchy, it feels like it's swelling up so quickly that there's just no room to get any breath in and out. And soon, it's spread to your chest. Your body no longer feels like it's your own. You can't even control it enough to be able to breathe. And then there's the desperate scramble for an EpiPen or a mad dash to the hospital. I remember all the times when it's felt like if the cab to the hospital stopped at one more set of traffic lights, I might not make it. And I know I'm not the only one. Food allergies in the UK have doubled since 2008. So why are they on the rise, and can they be prevented? The Natasha Allergy Research Foundation is one organisation trying to answer these questions, and it's one of the 3 charities chosen for this year's Times and Sunday Times Christmas Appeal. The story today: why food allergies are on the rise.
I'm Tom Whipple, and I'm the science editor at The Times.
Tom, it feels like we're much more used to allergies now than we used to be. How much has that changed just in the course of your reporting? I mean, I remember as a kid, I remember sort of being the odd one out because nobody had heard about allergies. And now it seems like everywhere you go, people are warning about them.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think we should turn this around. I know you're the presenter, but you've made yourself the topic. Tell us about your allergy. What are you allergic to? When did you first realise it, and how does it limit your life?
It's very boring. I'm allergic to nuts, all nuts, and quite a lot of seeds too, so sesame seeds. Poppy seeds I can have in small amounts, and then it gets quite bad quite quickly. Sunflower seeds, all that whole batch of really healthy stuff, it turns out I shouldn't touch. And I found out when I was a kid, but back then, I remember at school, or, if you went into a restaurant, if you're eating out, nobody had ever heard of it. Whereas now, everywhere you go, there are signs. There are things warning you on menus that something might contain nuts or was made in the same kitchen as nuts, which is a world away from anything I ever experienced growing up when people just stared at you like you were strange.
And presumably people thought that you were just fussy or something, and you'd come up with this weird excuse.
You really are interviewing me. I love this. It's very weird. Yes, I mean, to be honest, my poor parents, who neither of them had allergies, and I think they didn't really know what to make of me at first. So I was probably about 2 when I first tried a nut, and at first I think they just assumed it was a bad nut and got me to try another. And it was just a very slow process of my being very sick quite frequently and having to be rushed to hospital and suddenly realising there's a whole other group of ingredients I couldn't go anywhere near. Even doctors were sort of slightly baffled by it, but they could sense that what was happening to me was an allergic reaction, so perhaps I should steer clear. But I mean, you must have noticed that in your reporting, because it does feel like it's suddenly something that everybody talks about, which just wasn't the case back in like the 80s.
It is. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that you were at the vanguard of a trend, that you were once again finding yourself on the bleeding edge of the zeitgeist.
I do what I can for my profession, even at the age of 2.
Yeah, look, as always with these things, we're very wary of whether this is reporting trends, whether it's things like, perhaps could be the case in ADHD or autism, where some of the rise is because we're noticing it more and it's more accepted. I think it's pretty well accepted that that's not the case with allergies, particularly severe ones. And the statistics are there and they back it up. Broadly speaking, in the last 15, 20 years, we're talking about a kind of doubling of the prevalence of allergies. Times data journalist Jenna Smart found that in the past year, 7,418 people were admitted to hospital for food-related anaphylactic shocks, in comparison with about 5,200 in 2014. That's NHS figures.
Trying to work out how many of those are me.
Well, yeah. Imperial College estimates that about 4% of preschool children have food allergy, about 1% of adults. Total prevalence growing over the 10-year period from 0.4% to 1.1%. These are all statistics that are saying different things. They'll all be disagreeing using different data sets, but what they are agreeing on is it's increasing. It's increasing, doubling to tripling this millennium.
And Tom, whilst it seems like allergies have become so much more common over the last few years, have they become more dangerous? Are we seeing more fatalities at the same time?
It seems like we're not, which, may be to do with more awareness of how to treat them and better treatments. As ever, data is hard to come by, but there was a 2015 article in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology, which looked at admissions to hospital for anaphylaxis. And between 92 and 2012, so that's a 20-year period, they increased about 7-fold. But during that period, the instance of fatal anaphylaxis didn't, which is an indicator that, maybe there's just more EpiPens around, there's more people better prepared for how to deal with it. And, ideally, we wouldn't have to have people dealing with allergies. Ideally, we wouldn't have the allergies.
So that's what the numbers look like. But why? Why are so many more people suffering from allergies now? And what actually triggers a reaction in the body? To find out, let's turn to an allergy expert.
My name is Stephen Holgate, and I'm a research professor into allergy and lung diseases at the University of Southampton.
Stephen, how long have you been researching allergies, and have you seen the attitudes towards them change over time?
Well, I came to Southampton first in 1975, so that makes it almost not quite 50 years, which is actually quite a long time. And of course, in those days, allergy really was just being recognised as a real problem in medicine. The last 5 decades has seen a massive increase in allergy, and of course this rise in its occurrence is worrying, and we need to try and get behind it.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about why there seems to have been this rise in the incidence of allergies, but before we do, just going back to basics, so I suffer from an allergy. I'm allergic to nuts. I know, not much fun, but just explain for listeners, what exactly happens in my body when I eat a nut? What is it? How does the allergy play out?
Right. So this is being very clearly defined now. We do understand the mechanisms. And what happens is that people who are allergic, like yourself, have proteins that they develop an immune response to. Now, this immune response is unusual in that it's similar to the immune response that's developed when we defend ourselves against parasites. But for some reason or other, the proteins in foods and things we breathe that become what we call allergens are related to some of those proteins in the parasites. And so what you're doing here, developing an allergic reaction, is that the immune response is being tricked into thinking that it's got a parasite that it's trying to eliminate, whereas in fact it hasn't. So that's what an allergic reaction is. And what happens when you put a peanut on your lips or in your mouth, because you become so sensitive, because peanut is one of the worst in provoking severe allergy. You become so sensitive that the antibodies, as we call them, the special antibodies, they're called IgE, which differentiates them from the antibodies that defend us against ordinary infections. But these IgE antibodies fix themselves on special cells in the body. And these cells, when they see the allergen, in your case peanut, with the antibodies stuck to the surface of them, this links the antibodies together, and suddenly these cells fire and release a whole variety of chemicals locally and into the bloodstream. And that's what triggers the allergic reaction.
Why do some people seem to have more severe reactions than others?
Severe allergy has been a big problem, and it's increasing, I'm afraid. I think one of the big issues about allergy is that it's happening at very, very low concentrations of allergen. And I think the number of organs, body organs, that are involved in this have been increasing. So initially, you might just, in the old days, have hay fever or a bit of eczema. But nowadays, you often have multiple organs affected because the sensitivity of people has increased so much. And I think that is one of the things we need to try and understand, is why people have become so much more sensitive to agents that they come into daily contact with, in essence. And of course, that's where a lot of the research will be.
So, Stephen, you've explained how an allergy plays out in someone's body and why it seems that people are becoming more sensitive to them. So, just stepping back, the question I think a lot of people will have is, why does it feel like allergies are on the rise? Why do so many more people seem to be allergic?
Well, I think we have to understand, first of all, how allergy begins, often very early in life, in early childhood, quite often. And what's so interesting about this field is that allergy develops almost by default, because what should happen when a baby is born is that as their immune system starts to see all sorts of different things, from foods to things that the child breathes or touches, what should happen is that a set of cells should come in that damp down the allergic reaction. So normally, in normal people who don't have allergy, this, we call it a regulatory mechanism, comes into action very early on in life and damps down the IgE allergic antibody reaction. And so what people who develop allergy have is the fact that their damping down process with these regulatory cells is faulty. And there are two reasons for the defection. The first is the fact, and you'll probably know this yourself, that allergies run in families. So genetics plays a role here. Secondly, the reason really why this is happening is because in early life, we're not seeing things that induce this damping down response. Now, let me explain that a bit further. Back in the old days, over 100 years ago, when allergy was quite rare, in fact, the lifestyle that people had was very different. And the microorganisms and other things that we came into contact with on a daily basis is very different to what we come into contact with now. And one of the major causes of this rising trend in allergy is because the barrier function of our tissues has altered. Now, by that I mean that the lining cells of our gut, in our lungs, on our skin and eyes and nose have become a bit leaky. So this means that the allergen, in your case peanut, is able to get across into the body more easily and start stirring up trouble. And of course, that trouble is being stirred up if the suppressive response, this regulatory response, is not induced.
That's so interesting. And why is that? Why is the tissue becoming more leaky? What's changed?
Well, it's the chemicals I think we're coming into contact with. Hundreds of thousands of chemicals that have come into our environment in the last, 50 to 100 years, that of course our bodies have never seen before. And these are man-made chemicals. whether they be air pollutants, whether they be things that are put in foods, in ultra processing, whether they are things that we use in our homes to clean our houses. So these are the things that create this breakdown in barrier function. And of course, if they're all around us, we can't avoid them. And so it happens on a regular basis that this barrier is breached. And then, of course, if you happen to be one of those people with the genetic makeup and in an environment where the allergens are coming in, then off it goes.
That's so interesting. So it's man-made chemicals that wouldn't have been in the system before. It's environmental factors that have changed. Is it anything to do with our lifestyles?
Yeah, very much so. Lifestyle is hugely important because one of the things that can maintain the barrier function are bacteria and fungi and viruses, not the nasty ones that cause disease, but the ones that we come into contact with in everyday life. We call them commensals. It's a funny word. I'm not quite sure what that word means. But anyway.
Glad it's not just me.
Yeah, the good bacteria, the good viruses, and the good fungi. And what's happened over the last 50 to 100 years is that our soil and our environment has changed such that the diversity of these organisms are now narrowed down to much smaller numbers. So this drop in range of organisms that a normal person would have been exposed to 100 years ago in an environment are no longer exposed to those. And again, these bacteria that I'm talking about in the gut, in the lung, on the skin, they're the ones that help induce this regulatory protective immune response. So if we don't have them on board when we're born, or our mother doesn't pass us to them when the child is born, then obviously the barrier function issue I've just mentioned, plus the inability to mount this suppressive regulatory response, means that the allergic process penetrates through and you're on your way.
So, I mean, is it basically that we're almost too hygienic, we're losing a lot of the bacteria that would have helped us?
It's wonderfully exciting science has been done in this area. For example, in Bavaria, you get babies that are born on the old traditional farms there, where the animals, the cows and the other animals on the farm, intermingle with the people living on the farm. Of course, they're exposed to all of these bacteria that we in the cities and in our urban settings are not exposed to. So in those children that are born in these livestock farms where they're exposed to high concentrations of these organisms are protected against developing allergy. And these experiments have extended to all parts of the world. So there was a group of people in Germany and in Switzerland that migrated to America in the 1600s. Called the Amish people, and they kept their traditional lifestyle. They kept the horses and the non-smoking, the non-chemicals, all that stuff, and they have no allergy at all in those communities in America now, compared to 30% odd in the rest of the country.
That's remarkable. What would your advice be to people who are about to have a baby? You know, is there anything you could do during pregnancy or when a baby is born that would make them less likely to suffer from allergies?
Well, I think the advice that we're now moving towards, which is the opposite to what people would think about, is to make sure that children have a diverse diet as they start to come off their milk early in life, such that they're introduced to really quite high concentrations of things like egg and milk and peanut, which are the most common allergens, and become desensitized to them early in life, where their immune response is still maturing and still very plastic. I mean, that's why we give vaccines to children very early in life, because their immune response is so responsive to their vaccination. And obviously what people are wanting to do is to create some sort of oral vaccine that they could give to a newborn child or a baby regularly for the first 6 months, such that the immune response is kitted up properly, as if it was 100 years ago, and this regulatory response is induced, and then allergy would never develop. So that's where the new research, I think, is going to head.
Tom, there are lots of different theories now about why people are developing allergies and why they're developing them more than they used to. Are there also potential cures?
Now, this is the interesting thing. The one thing that's definitely come on my radar in the past 5 to 10 years is this idea that people like you might have a way to... No one likes the word cure. They don't use the word cure. But to get to the stage where actually they can eat peanuts, certainly at trace levels.
How are they doing that? How does that work? What is this sort of cure?
So this cure is, I'll use the words immunotherapy, which are, we have lots and lots
Impressive.
of jazzy, yes. But I use it because immunotherapy is a big thing. And, in cancer, there are incredibly complex cutting-edge treatments where they cost a load of money, and it'll involve things like editing genes or really getting down at the molecular level, interfering with the way that cancers work, boosting the immune system in all sorts of ways, cancer vaccines, all these things which are incredibly cutting edge and require the finest that biotech can do. The immunotherapy for allergies is just taking the foods.
Really?
Yes.
So should I be giving myself little bits of peanut?
Look, doctors would say no. I spoke to a doctor who was running one of these trials, and he said, no, please don't. In the trial, we have nurses on hand 24 hours a day. We've had severe shocks. We're ready to go in. But the treatment is that. So you take a small amount of peanut protein and you take it up until the point at which there is a reaction. And then that's your dose. That's your minimum dose. Then you acclimatize the body at that level, and then you slowly increase the dose, and you get up to the stage where you're having whole peanuts. And you have to maintain this. There'll be people who have to maintain this for the rest of their lives.
Wow, so there really are hugely promising trials going on now, but I feel like we should just emphasise, please don't try this at home, not if you're allergic. I don't want to be responsible for people flooding A&E over Christmas. I know that's what would happen to me if I tried it. This really does have to be done under close medical supervision. Is it working, though? Have you spoken to people who've been through the trials?
I spoke to a woman whose daughter was allergic to almost all nuts, including coconuts, walnuts, and several other things, where they were really worried that, she basically couldn't live her life. And they put her on this treatment. She went to America for it. She's now 5, the daughter. She had a food freedom party where the idea was people turned up with food and no one checked the labels.
Wow.
And she had a lovely time. One of her favourite foods now, and this is amazing because I don't think I've eaten one of these in 15 years, but Bounty bars. She loves Bounty. It's almost just sort of 2 fingers to the allergy.
I've never tried one.
Oh, it's the taste of paradise, Manveen.
I wish you hadn't said that. Tom, this is a cause and a charity that the Times has chosen to support this year. Tell us why.
We're supporting it because it really, as you know, it really has an effect on people's lives. Treating allergies is one of those things that could really improve a lot of people's lives, and finding a way to solve this problem is something, it's no small thing.
Stephen, not only do you dedicate your life to researching allergies at the University of Southampton, but you're associated with the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, which Times is supporting. Just explain to people who are listening to this why allergy research matters. What is it that fuels you to do what you do every day?
Yes. Well, of course, we talk sometimes about allergy as a rather sort of trivial human disease, with hay fever in the spring and maybe some eczema as a young child. But it's not trivial because it can kill. Natasha was a 15-year-old girl who died tragically on her way on holiday with her father and friend to Nice in France, when she became overwhelmed by an allergic reaction to sesame seeds that she ate accidentally in a sandwich that wasn't labelled, and lost her life. And her mother and father have dedicated the rest of their life now to try and get to the bottom of this, because they think that this is a preventable condition. We're pushing hard now in the charity to get an allergy czar, as we call, somebody who will champion the whole of the allergy field, to get more allergy specialists, to get more advice out to schools and universities, to get greater public awareness. Because previously, of course, most people aren't aware of all of this until it becomes too late, and then it's very hard for them. So this is what this wonderful charity is doing, and I have nothing but admiration for what they're trying to achieve, and it's a pleasure and a privilege being part of it.
The Natasha Allergy Research Foundation is one of the 3 charities chosen for this year's Times and Sunday Times Christmas Appeal. Funds raised will be shared alongside 2 other charities, James's Place and Hope and Homes for Children. James's Place was founded by the parents of James Wentworth Stanley, who took his own life in 2006, aged 21. Its 3 centres in Liverpool, London and Newcastle offer free, life-saving therapy to suicidal men. Hope and Homes for Children works across 9 countries to get children out of orphanages where they're at risk of violence, neglect and trafficking. The charity reunites children with their families where possible, or it finds them a foster family so that they can have a new place to call home. You can find out more about the Christmas Appeal and how to donate in the link in the description notes to this episode. Thanks to Tom Whipple, science editor at The Times, and Professor Sir Stephen Holgate from the University of Southampton. The producer today was Sam Chantarasak, the executive producer was Kate Ford, theme music was composed by Mal Lassetto, and sound design was by Hannah Farrell. The podcast will be back on Boxing Day when we'll be running the 8-part series, Cocaine Inc. The award-winning investigation was co-produced by some of the members of our team at thestory in a global collaboration between The Times, The Sunday Times and News Corp Australia. We thought you'd want to hear it. But otherwise, that's it from me and Luke for 2024. Thanks so much for listening and for all your messages, reviews and support over the year. The Story will be back with a daily news deep dive on January the 6th. We have some really exciting episodes in production, ready to welcome you into 2025. In the meantime, Merry Christmas to you all, and here's to a brilliant new year.